Welcome to We're People First, the Jeff Moyer Show.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, hi, everybody. Welcome.
We are so excited about today. This is a show that we are really jazzed about, and what's happening today is we're doing a show that was actually solicited by the publicist for PBS's American Masters series on October 19th, Becoming Helen Keller. They reached out to us to have a guest, and we selected the guest we chose, Rebecca Alexander, and she was available, and boy, do we have a show.
It's going to be wonderful. And it's been kind of a crazy week, hasn't it, Jeff?
I'll say very busy.
I do want to say a couple of things before we launch, because the show's going to be a little different. We're going to have a longer interview because it is Rebecca, the awesome Rebecca. And also, Jeff's going to start with a song in a moment. But first, I want to say thank you for people that have already started to donate. We've had some donations to the show. We've gone 6 months now. Does it seem like 6 months we've had the show?
Yeah, it does feel like 6 months.
And so we feel like it's being well received. We've had shows that have had over 6,000 views. So we are asking if you want to continue to support the Jeff Moyer Show, We're People First. There's a donation button that's on the website.
And we now have membership.
So
please go to jeffmoyer.com and become a member. We will not give away your information to anyone.
And membership's free. That's free.
Exactly.
So
if you'd like to donate, we have a $5 a month. Please contribute to the show.
That'd be awesome. But you can give as little as 99 cents, and that's welcome too.
And we also have, we are asking you to fill out a questionnaire about who you are so that we know, so that we can tailor shows to our audience. Because we just, people have said, well, who listens to your show? Who watches your show?
We know there's a lot, but we don't know anything about them.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to gather some great information, and it'll be kept in confidentiality, never shared.
After all this time, we are now ready to accept members. Come on, y'all.
Yes.
Thanks to the wonderful Bill Malin, our producer, and my webmaster, he has gotten the website ready. So you can donate, become a member, and fill out the questionnaire.
We'd be so appreciative.
But remember, membership is free. And we do want to thank Joel Snyder, the great Joel Snyder, who we had on last time, for a $250 donation.
Very generous donation.
We're so grateful to Joel.
So great. Now I'm going to start with, are we going to start with your song?
Let's do the song first.
Okay, but first, I want to show them the picture and give us, Jeff's songs always have a backstory. And I love for him to share the backstory of his songs. So I'm going to hold up a picture, and he's going to tell you all about it.
And this is our audio description portion.
Oh, yes, sorry.
In first of all, the photograph is a large format framed photograph of Helen Keller as a child in Victorian dress, high collar, long sleeved, long dressed, reaching out to the hand of Anne Sullivan, who was her teacher. And of course, this is the image that most people know of Helen Keller, this age. And that's why Becoming Helen Keller, that Rebecca Alexander will tell us about, is so important. But I've had that photograph hanging in my office for over 40 years. And
you're going to tell us later, he wrote a letter to Helen Keller.
I will be reading an open letter to Helen Keller, but we are wearing our fall clothing.
Yeah, it is fall in San Diego. A lot of people go, well, you don't have seasons in San Diego, but yes, we do.
Yeah, not much.
They're subtle,
we do,
and until you've been lived here a while, you don't really notice them. But now we are in fall, and we're starting to get the rainy season.
So talk about what you're wearing. That's what we're here.
Okay. So I have a turquoise tunic and a turquoise jumpsuit on. This is a wonderful necklace that's set in silver. With a pink stone, and my glasses. Oh, I have to tell you about my glasses real quick. I had to do a 3-day 8 to 8 seminar on the TV, on the monitor, on the computer, and if I hadn't had these glasses, because I was staring at that ring light for 3 full days, never had a sore eye problem or?
As those of you who don't know and can't see, Christy now has red glasses like I wear, and they are so comfortable for her for all purposes. It's true. It's not just me. They're not just for Jeff Moyer anymore. Run out and get some red glasses, red orange. Okay.
Okay.
The story.
So your song.
The song.
First, the title.
The song is "We Will See One Another in the Morning," and I wrote this song in 1995. I was sitting by myself and thinking about, as I was quickly going blind, about the fact that I knew that when I crossed over, when I'm in the spirit world, I will see again. A very comforting thought. So I wrote this song. I learned that Helen Keller said the same thing. And so this is my song with Helen Keller, "We Will See One Another in the Morning."
Good.
Okay,
Go for it.
Here we go.
Got to get all those buttons going.
No. I had it queued up.
I believe you. I saw you do it.
We will see one another in the morning, when the dawn paints new hope upon the sky, when the darkness has passed and the light breaks anew, and the day's splendor fills our blinking eyes. We will see one another in the morning, when we see the sweet colors of the dawn, when the dark and the cold and the night disappear, and our fear of the blackness has gone. In the morning light, in the sweet sunlight, we will meet once again. We will meet once again. We will walk in the sunlight by the river, when our souls have raised up from this place. We will meet in the sunlight by the river. We'll know every name and every face. We will rest in the sunlight by the river, as we lie in the grasses sweet and green. We will rest in the sunlight by the river. No sweeter place our eyes have ever seen. In the morning light, in the sweet sunlight, we will meet once again. We will meet once again, once again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. I always love your songs, and I always love those backstories. They're so great. Your songs always have so much information that people need to know about. Now, did you adjust that mic after you played
I
your...
did. I'm back in without the reverb and all set.
Okay. So let's see. A couple of things. We heard from one of our loyal fans that sang the ADA anthem, Amanda.
Yes.
She was so cute. She just raved about some things that we sent her as a thank you note, and her troop. And we're hoping to have her on a future show. I think she'd be a great guest to have. So let's work on that. And let's see, what else do we need to say before we launch into our interview? We have a few minutes here before we have to do that.
Well, I just want to talk again about why we want you to join. What's the point of membership? You know, we are asked to join so many things. Even if you want to buy a shirt, you have to join that outfit. The reason for this is very different. It is to show for potential sponsorship and syndication and such that we do have a viewership that cares about what we're doing, that is behind this idea about a show on inclusion, on accommodation, on the wholeness of all of us in the human family. That's number one. So number one is show us so that we can show others your support of what we're doing. And number two is, as I said, the questionnaire, so we'll know who you are. If you have a disability, what's a disability? Or are you a parent? Or have you been a supporter of my work over the years? Or is it something else that led you to me? Whatever, us rather.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, right? How did you find us? That'd be, there's a spot that you can add some comments, and we just want to know how you found us, and please share that you have found us with other people so we can increase our viewership.
Yeah, as my son tells me, Dad, you need to say mash the like button and
crush it.
Share it. Yeah, crush it. Is that what you say, crush it?
I think that's part of the...
You know, I'm now one of those people to say that's what the young people say.
Right. It ain't easy to be our age, let me tell you.
But we are advertising that we have the combined age of 150 years.
Yes.
We've been on this planet a while.
Yes, absolutely.
And Helen Keller is a woman that has been part of my life in very powerful ways for 60 some years. And I'll be telling about that in the story. But the idea that the publicist for Becoming Helen Keller reached out to us to have a guest so that we could...
Tell us about who that is.
Oh, exactly right.
Yes,
Thank you. Yeah.
Right.
The publicist for for Becoming Helen Keller is Terry Hartman Squire. And Terry runs an outfit called Lights, Camera, Access, SOF Communications in Los Angeles. And I have known Terry for many years, and on the 30th anniversary year for the Americans with Disabilities Act, I was asked to participate. They used my song, the ADA Anthem, as intro music and extra music for a fabulous production they did with many different elements showing different people with disabilities in various elements of acting, performing, entertaining.
And it's getting close to time when we have to greet our guests.
All right. Well, you asked me to ramble on.
I did.
So anyway, a shout out to our dear friend and supporter, Terry Hartman Squire. When we said, yes, we definitely want to have a guest from Becoming Helen Keller, I asked who was available and who was on in their list of folks to be interviewed. And one of the people whose name was not familiar to me was Rebecca Alexander. Now, Rebecca is a remarkable woman in her own right in many regards. She is an extreme athlete. We'll talk about that. She is a psychotherapist. She's
an author, and her book is called Not Fade Away, a memoir of senses lost and found. And she is just fascinating to listen to. We've listened to some of her interviews that she's done before.
And you've been reading the book.
I've been reading her book, and it's so wonderful in a real personal way for me, because a lot of the things she describes, because she has Usher syndrome, which we suspect Jeff has. And it's type 3, where you lose your sight and your hearing over a period of time. And some of the things that she talks about experiencing, like when she was supposed to start to learn Braille, and Jeff will talk to you about this later, when he didn't want to learn Braille. And just so many little incidences that she describes, I've heard Jeff describe in his life too. So we're excited about her talking about her book. And she is, did you say a psychotherapist?
I did.
Awesome.
And she is the narrator of the PBS American Masters series, Becoming Helen Keller, which will air on October 19th. 7 p.m. Eastern.
So let's bring her on.
And with that, we're going to segue, and Rebecca will be with us momentarily.
Guest interview.
I'm here. I just want to tell everyone quickly for audio description that I am Rebecca Alexander. I am a Caucasian woman with dark, long brown hair. I'm wearing gold hoop earrings and a white shirt, which for sign language does not help because I really should be wearing black, but that's what happened today.
Now, Rebecca, I'm sorry, there was a musical segue during the introduction piece. I'm sorry you're not familiar with our format. So you were talking while the harmonica was playing. Tell us again.
Start over, Rebecca.
Oh, well, I'm sorry for that. So.
No problem.
My audio description, just for those of our low vision and blind friends, is that I am a white woman with dark, long brown hair. I'm wearing gold hoops and a white shirt. And usually I try to wear black when I'm going to sign, but we have an interpreter on this call, so that's wonderful. And I don't have to be the one signing today. But I'm very happy to be with you.
Rebecca wouldn't say, but I will say that Christy has told me that she also is a beautiful woman.
Yes, quite beautiful.
Now, Rebecca, you and I have had a couple quick conversations and discovered that we're siblings under the retina. We have different forms of retinitis pigmentosa. I went blind from the inside out. My center vision went first, and yours is tunneling in. What is your vision like at this moment?
Well, that is an excellent question, because what is our vision like at any given moment? It all depends on the environment. It depends on, what spaces around us. I, in this moment, have been getting, because I had cataract surgery during the summer, I'm getting white flashes of light that they say is just sort of a phenomenon that happens frequently, but it just happened, so I thought I'd tell you. And I have about 10 to 12 degrees, I would say, of my centralmost vision. A lot of people who have RP have tunnel vision. They lose their periphery and then their central vision. And then there's a smaller group of us with donut vision. So I have vision inside of the donut and outside of the donut.
Oh. But
there's an actual donut where I don't have vision. So my outermost periphery, I can see my hands, which is not really usable vision. And certainly at night, I see nothing there. So my central vision is probably somewhere between maybe 10 and 12 degrees. 12 might be generous.
So would that be like holding a basketball in front of your face?
That would be like holding a basketball in front of my face. I probably wouldn't see the whole ball. Just, Jeff, it just depends on how far in front of me you are.
Right,
yes.
right.
I need people, so it's interesting. Well, we'll get there, but when people sign to me, oftentimes they sign too close and I need them to scoot back so I can see them better, because we think in terms of degrees. The further they are from my face, the more of their hands I can see.
There are 100,000 people in the United States with retinitis pigmentosa, and there are 500 forms of the disease. 500 forms. So I've heard of your disease. I have inverse RP or cone rod dystrophy, but we see differently. I see just light at this point. But you started to lose your vision at what age?
Well, I was diagnosed with RP at the age of 12. I had difficulty seeing the blackboard at school, and I told my dad, and he took me to an optometrist. And of course, they said their equipment wasn't sophisticated enough to identify that there was something in the back of my eye. So they sent us. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. They sent us to UCSF and to Stanford, and both facilities gave us the diagnosis of retinitis pigmentosa. And it wasn't until later, at the age of 19, that I was further diagnosed with Usher syndrome.
So Usher syndrome, there are several forms of it, but in your case, why don't you tell us about your hearing loss?
Sure. So there are 3 types of Usher syndrome. Today, we think we have about 1% of the population of people with Usher syndrome actually identified.
Wow.
Which is about 400,000 worldwide. So we think there are a lot more out there, and part of the awareness piece is so important, so that people know that they're not alone, and also that we can, become a bigger community. So type 1, you're born completely deaf and you're progressively losing your vision. Type 2, you're born with a set amount of hearing loss and you're progressively losing your vision. And type 3 is the mildest onset of both progressive vision and hearing loss. So, yeah.
And because you told me that there is such a thing as a blood test for the Usher syndrome disease or genetic predisposition, I'm seeking that test now to discover if I have.
Right.
Yeah, there's genetic testing. What's interesting, Jeff, both when you and I, were growing up, they didn't have, you couldn't genetically test for Usher syndrome. Now you can. And of course, technology is above and beyond anything that we can sort of comprehend, but certainly in terms of identifying genetic disorders, you are absolutely able to identify Usher syndrome now.
Right, and because you're so much younger than Jeff, he really, you'll tell us about this, I know, but he really had everybody puzzled. In fact, his parents didn't believe him when he said.
You're giving away all the plot twists.
Sorry. I'll be quiet.
I wanted to ask you about. Your life is so interesting, and you are so successful in so many areas that we could talk for an hour. But I do want to ask you about becoming an extreme athlete. Is that something, do you think, in some way that was connected to the losses you were enduring?
Yeah, I think that becoming an extreme athlete, and I want to thank Christy for plugging my book. But one of the things that I mentioned or I talk about in my book was, in addition to going deaf and blind, I also was in a terrible accident and I broke just about everything in my body, and I was told I would never walk properly again. And so living with, chronic pain and then getting this diagnosis, this full diagnosis that I was going deaf and blind, I think that I had to, rehabilitate my body. And then once I'd gotten this diagnosis, and there was something about feeling like when I was physically active, when I was doing the all of these, competitive races, that I felt so alive. And I was so able to focus on what I have and not what I don't have, that I felt so able and so present in the moment. And so that really has been a big part of my experience of being so physically active.
I think I get the same thing from music. When I'm on stage and have a guitar in my hand, I have that sense of there is no limitation. One of the things that you've done that I'd like you to talk about briefly is you would have been a great convict because you escaped from Alcatraz. I don't mean you would have been a great convict. I don't think you could have been a convict, but if you had been, you could have escaped from Alcatraz because you swam from Alcatraz to San Francisco.
Yeah, I guess I thought that was a good idea, huh? Well, and so that was actually called that man may see. It was for UCSF, for the ophthalmology department there.
And that's University of California, San Francisco.
Yes, exactly.
Uh-huh.
And my ophthalmologist, Dr. Jackie Duncan, was there, and I really wanted to support her in her research. She is one of the, the few clinicians who is just incredibly compassionate and kind.
Mm.
And so they invited me to do this swim, and I was like, oh, sure, why not? Now, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro a couple months before that. And I was like, well, if I can do that, then of course I can swim. I don't think I actually realized what being in the open water in the San Francisco Bay would be like until I was actually in the open water of the San Francisco Bay. But when I say that I swam that deafblind, I really mean it. I mean, I had no cochlear implants on. I couldn't hear a thing, and my goggles became so foggy that I basically had this little peephole of light that was just guiding me to where I needed to.
Now, I assume there was a boat with you?
There was a kayak next to me. Yeah.
A kayak.
Wow.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Well, I know it from your book. I'm loving your book, by the way. I didn't quite get finished. My goal was to finish for the show, and I didn't quite make that because it's been a crazy week. But you did mention you're not an only child. You had two brothers that were quite competitive. And so you had to join in, right? You had to survive.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was probably a part of what kept me, so fierce, right? Is that if you can't beat them, join them. And I think I always felt like I was trailing behind, but I definitely, I think having brothers certainly helped me develop that thicker skin.
Absolutely. And one of your brothers is a fraternal twin of yours, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I think
And
that
he's
is
in
so
San
cool.
Diego. Yeah.
You said that yesterday when we were chatting. Is he working here?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, he works there. He's he's my twin brother, so he's my pride and joy. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, now we've covered everything except your cochlear implants. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because if I was born with the type of hearing loss I had when I became a candidate for a cochlear implant, I would have had very severe impaired speech. My speech would have been very difficult to understand, I think. So in many ways, it's interesting. People say when they hear about going deaf and blind that I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what that's like. And I sort of feel very fortunate to have lost my hearing later, so that in getting cochlear implanted, I was able to relearn how to hear digitally, and I was an ideal candidate because I knew what things sounded like.
Yeah.
Before I got my right ear cochlear implanted, with a hearing aid, I had about 28% discrimination. And without a hearing aid, I had about 26. So 26% of the time someone spoke to me, I could accurately repeat back what was spoken.
Yeah.
That's not a lot.
Not a lot. No.
Yeah, so it's a tremendous amount of listening therapy, and it is absolutely worth it. But about a year or so later, oops.
Hold on. Is that your phone?
I turned off everything, and I guess I didn't turn off everything.
That's all right.
No problem.
It happens on the best of shows.
This is what happens on live shows.
I know. So anyway, so my right ear was always decorative. It could wear an earring, but I never used it for the phone. Nobody ever walked on my right side. And so after I was implanted and tested at about a year and a half later, I was up somewhere between 92 and 97, 98%.
Fabulous.
And
Fabulous.
it was absolutely remarkable. Long story short, my left ear, which was always my better ear, when it became a candidate about 5 years later, after 3 months of, after being activated and a lot of listening therapy, sentences in a quiet sound booth, I tested 100%. And I was, beyond,
Absolutely.
just excited.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Wonderful.
Oh my gosh. That is just such great news.
Yeah. And, but without them, I am completely deaf, and nobody sleeps better in New York City than I do.
I lived in New York City for a year. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
It never sleeps. The city that never sleeps.
And
It
when
really
you're visiting
doesn't.
like I have, you never sleep because the noise is so great. Okay, now I want to just touch lightly on this, but when people think of Helen Keller, they think of the horror of being blind and deaf.
Mhm.
And for those of us who've gone blind and are losing our hearing, uh, as I said, I've not been tested, and I don't know to what degree I will lose my hearing. But I must say that I have faced dread, but I also have come to acceptance through a lot of work. And for you, having really gone deaf and really going blind, tell us about your journey coming to the place that you are such a giver in the world and such a light. How has that been?
You know, it's interesting. I think that one of the things that I've had to learn over the years, and I think that I didn't just, come out this way. It's been a tremendous amount of self inquiry and self reflection and
Yes.
struggle. And there's been, so many things that I have gone through and the ways in which I've gotten in my own way because of my own fears and of judgment, of so many different things, right?
Yeah.
And what I will tell you is that what I always knew, for instance, when I learned that I was going deaf, I decided that I needed to learn sign language because I didn't actually know or believe that I would really fully lose my hearing. They'd never seen Usher syndrome as it presented itself in me. So it's not like I had a trajectory that I could follow.
Yes.
I knew that I had to develop comfort with discomfort. And so
I'm sorry. Comfort.
That's a great
Comfort-
statement. Say
comfort-
that again.
Comfort with what?
comfort with discomfort.
Oh, yeah.
That's an awesome
That
statement.
is an awesome statement.
So my life really is encapsulated by just developing comfort with discomfort. And what I have found is that there are very few moments in my life that are not uncomfortable. And so I think that ability to embrace the discomfort, and I don't embrace it in a way that I'm saying I accept this, I enjoy it, but in a way of understanding that it is a part of the human condition. And I think that when you live with loss, it's interesting, we talk about grief and loss.
Yeah.
I was trained in complicated grief. But when we talk about grief and loss, we think about loved ones, we think about losing a pet or a family member or dear friend. We don't think about the loss that we experience throughout the lifespan.
Yes.
And those smaller losses, and maybe the little L losses and the big L losses,
Right.
but loss is all around us constantly, and we need to learn how to be able to incorporate it as a part of life and not simply be devastated every time we experience loss.
Mhm.
That's awesome. My gosh, that is so profound. And
Yeah.
you're so young to have all these insights.
Yeah, well, the going
Congratulations.
deaf and blind will do it to you.
It's interesting. You use words that are not loaded. You use words that carry the meaning without the tremendous emotional baggage. And I think that is, as you teach other people through what you say, I mean, you're reaching everyone that's listening to you now in a way that no one else could. What you're saying is it's gentle and yet profound and has the emotional depth of loaded words, but you're using language that is open and available. You're really a wonderful teacher.
Well, you do serve. I've been doing my research, and I see that you serve on several boards. Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about your service there.
Yeah, so I'm on the advisory board for the Disability Rights Advocates. I'm on the board of the Usher Syndrome Society. I've been on the board of the Cleveland Sight Center of No Limits for Deaf Children in Los Angeles. And my life, it's interesting because my dad and my grandmother, who's almost 104, she'll be 104 on November 5th.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, she lives in Santa Cruz, California, and they were always civil servants. They really believed in the importance of giving back. And that was what I was raised with.
Awesome.
My dad saved a man's life, Kevin Cooper, who's on death row in San Quentin in California. uh, about 3 hours before he was going to be put to death for a heinous murder crime that he didn't commit.
Oh,
And
my.
he essentially left his job as a corporate law lawyer to do what was right. And there are so many different ways in which my grandmother and my dad and my family really influenced me. So, when I was growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, I delivered meals to people living with HIV and AIDS, and partially because I heard a man speak when I was probably about 14 years old, and this was, in the early 90s, that who had HIV, and I really just felt such a kindred, sort of spirit with him. I felt like, wow, this is someone I could really relate to, and he was a gay man from New York City who came to speak at like the local synagogue. But his words so resonated with me, and I think at the time, even though I didn't quite know this, that I think I felt this sense of knowing that people were going to have to help me later on in my life,
Yes.
Mhm.
that I sort of needed to pay it forward. Whether I don't think that I was aware of it, but
Yeah.
there is no greater feeling, I think, than that just very basic human connection that happens when we help each other. Community is based on that sort of interface of and just that constant interchange of helping and giving, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a very profound moment when I actually heard a voice in my head. I was in an airport, and my flight had been delayed 5 hours, and I moaned thinking about the numbers of people that were going to have to help me. And
Mhm.
I heard this voice that said, "Don't you realize that every time someone helps you, you're giving them something of such great value because they're helping another human being, and there are very few opportunities for that in our world that
Mhm.
most people take advantage of." So, yeah, we offer people the opportunity, a moment of grace when they are able to help us.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I recently read a great book. I love to take little snippets from books I read, and it talked about uh, being of service is like a guide rope in life. And so if you can be of service to your community, as you were saying, it's just a wonderful way to live your life. Absolutely. Now we need to hear more
Yeah,
about
we're
the
going to pivot right now to
yeah
Helen Keller.
to the narrative that you're doing on the documentary.
So
Yeah.
you are you are the voice of the documentary. How did that happen? How did that opportunity come to you?
Jeff, I would love to know how they found out about me.
Wow.
I received an email. Yeah, I received an email from PBS, and they said we're doing, a biopic and a documentary, and we'd love to know whether you'd be interested. And in my mind, of course, because of having a condition that causes me to go deafblind, I should have put money on this, but I said I bet they're doing something on Helen Keller. And
Oh.
so I reached out. It was Michael Cantor who reached out to me from American Masters. And when he emailed, he said, "We're doing a documentary called Becoming Helen Keller." and and so I absolutely wanted to be a part of it because of how crucial it is for people to understand what her life was, aside from just being a child, having this first moment of experiencing language and water. I
Yes.
think how they found me was that in 2016, I was the recipient of the American Foundation for the Blind's Helen Keller Achievement Award. And that just dawned on me that may have been how.
I was going to say, I think that might have had something to do with it. I did
Yeah.
read where you got that award.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about in the course of this deep dive you're doing with Helen Keller. Did you learn anything that was a moment for you of recognition?
It's interesting because I learned a lot about Helen Keller when I received the Helen Keller Achievement Award from AFB, because I wanted to learn more about her for the acceptance speech, right?
Yes.
What is this award? Who is this person that it's being named for? Not just accepting it at face value. And, she was one of the founding members of the ACLU. She was a suffragist. She was very much into reproductive rights. And there were so many things that she was able to do. Part of what really resonated with me with Helen Keller was that she was a woman who simply couldn't be defined. And I think that when you live with the type of disability that I live with and Jeff, that you live with, people are constantly trying to pigeonhole us, or
Isn't
they're
that
trying to
true?
define us.
Yeah.
I'm not deaf and I'm not blind, but I'm not sighted and I'm not hearing. So what am I? And I live in this incredibly gray area. And as we know, people like things to be black and white, right or wrong, good or bad. They have a very difficult time living in the gray.
Yeah.
And I think that she just represented so many of these things that made people utterly uncomfortable. It was their own mortality or morbidity, their own feelings about what someone in her position could or could not do. So I think that her life was incredibly meaningful in so many ways. And I hope that people will really learn that. Most people don't know that Annie Sullivan herself was low vision, that she was visually
That's right.
impaired.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of different pieces of her life, and I think most importantly, and I hope that when I moderate a panel about this afterwards, she had a very short-lived love life
Yeah.
with a man named Peter Fagan, and her Annie Sullivan and her family, they were all vehemently opposed to her getting married, the potential of even having children. And so these are the things that aren't really talked about. And this is the intimacy of life is so crucial to who we are as humans.
Yes. Yeah. So, and all this will be brought out in the documentary is what you're
Yeah.
saying,
So
correct?
I
that's
you know,
great.
listen, we wish we could dive deeper, but we did definitely shed light on all of this.
That's great. Now it's a 2 hour long documentary. Am I right in that?
It is, and there's, what's interesting is we wanted to make it completely accessible. So we have not just ASL interpreters, we actually have deaf signers who are signing the words of Helen Keller. We have audio description for the blind. We have caption for, hard of hearing. We've really tried to.
Oh, that's
difficult. Yeah.
fantastic. And it's being aired on October 19th. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And check your local PBS stations to see the exact time of the airing.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe they said 9 p.m., but of course that's different everywhere, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So if you were to take your life and align it with Helen Keller's, what in our time has made the greatest difference, do you think, in opportunities that have opened for you?
You mean based on Helen Keller's life?
No, just comparing the two of you. I think you must have, in the course of your living with her, both because of your award and because of this, have you thought about, well, if it weren't for this, could I have done what I've done? Is there anything that you have had that she did not, that has given you a great opportunity?
It's interesting. It's an interesting question and probably requires more thought than I have time for this show. But I think one of the most important things that I find that I really share with Helen is this need to be heard, to speak our voices. Mm-hmm. Whether you have an actual physical voice or whether you communicate with an interpreter. I think that this wanting to be able to be seen as equal. And so that I think is something for me, being able to have my voice, a physical voice. I think I feel very fortunate for that. Yes. Because she did not have that. Yes. And in that way, I'm very lucky to have lost my hearing later, to have developed speech the way that I have.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I worked at Lexington School for the Deaf in New York way back in the early 70s. And before that, I used to think that blindness would have been, the hardest to be. But after seeing these really sweetheart children that were born deaf, that did not have language, and what a hard struggle it was for them, So I agree with you. That was a gift. That was a gift that you have. And that's one. And by the way, I've done my research. You have TED Talks, correct?
Yeah, actually, my TED Talk. Speaking of help, the title of my TED Talk was "Help," as an acronym, Humanity's Essence Living Proof. And just as you said, Jeff, that when we ask for help, it's about learning to be comfortable or develop comfort with asking for help, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
when you ask someone for help, not only are we creating those really important human connections, even with strangers, right? But we are also letting others know that they matter. And there's nothing that we want to know more in this world than that
Isn't
we
true?
matter and that
Wow.
we're needed. And when you
Yeah.
ask for help, you engender that.
Yes. Absolutely.
You know, I was thinking when I asked you the question about what has given you more opportunity. I was thinking more like because we live in a time of consciousness about women's rights and disability rights, and we live in a time of technology and mass communication. But you answered it differently, and I yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I know we could go on for hours, but
Is it time?
I'm going to be
Oh,
the
I
timekeeper
hate
here.
to say it. Well,
I hate to say it too. And you know what? I think you have to come back on our show again. What do
Oh,
you
I
think?
love it.
Rebecca,
you guys are such a delight.
you have so much to say, and
Absolutely.
we've only scratched the surface, of course. For anyone who wants to know more about this fantastically interesting woman, Rebecca Alexander, look her up. There's all kinds of free information you can grab and listen to. Interviews. She has been interviewed on
many shows.
Morning Joe, for example.
The
and
Today Show.
The Today Show, yeah. Living in New York, you've had that opportunity to step onto so many stages right in your own hometown.
Right.
Yeah.
You've been great. I can't
Awesome.
thank you enough for making your time available to us, Rebecca. It's been a complete honor and joy to have you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And get the book. It's a great read. It's a wonderful read. She's brutally honest about herself.
Much more
That's
so
true.
than I was in my book. Yeah. Well, Rebecca Alexander, 3
Thank
cheers.
you.
Yes.
Thank you
And-
again.
until we
Guys,
meet,
it's
till we
really
meet again.
wonderful to be with you. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank.
Bye.
People First Consciousness.
Well,
Wait. Okay,
okay.
you're ready.
I am going to read now. I sometimes wonder about this section of the show, but I've had several people say to me, "I love it when you read to us." So this is going to be a reading, and I'm going to have to get us queued up here, and gonna get into my word processor, and here we, let's see. Okay, I'm going to begin by a couple quotes from the star of the show, Helen Keller, and then I'll get into my reading, which is an open letter to Helen Keller. When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door, we do not see the one which has been opened for us. How about that? Isn't that a great?
Oh, I love to
Great
read her
quote.
quotes. If you Google Helen Keller quotes, there are quite a few, and they're all very, very wonderful to read.
This is another one which I love. I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but my chief duty is to accomplish humble tasks as if they were great and noble. The world is moved along not only by the mighty shoves of its heroes, but also by the aggregate of the tiny pushes of each honest worker. Each honest worker. Goodness. All right, here we go. An open letter to, let me turn up the volume a little bit. An open letter to Helen Keller, October 2021. Dear Helen, my life with you has had 4 major epochs. I write this letter today as a second open letter I've composed to you. The first was when I was 40 in 1989. I read it during my induction into the National Hall of Fame for People with Disabilities. When I was told that I'd be receiving that honor, I learned that you and Franklin Roosevelt had received the same recognition posthumously during the organization's first induction ceremony. I was so humbled that I felt compelled to tell my story concerning my perception of you over time. Act 1. Helen, I began to go blind when I was a little boy of 5. My parents were told by an optometrist that I was pretending I could not see, because he could see nothing wrong with my eyes. So, because the adults believed that I was pretending I could not see, I had to pretend that I could. It was a hard few years. I had just begun to manifest one of the 500 variations of the progressive retinal disease, retinitis pigmentosa. There are 100,000 Americans with RP, so perhaps there are only 200 with my orphan eye condition. I certainly forgive the many clinicians who missed my rare disease. By the time I was 11, I had lost 95% of my visual acuity, resulting in my inability to read print without a high-powered magnifier, which I finally was prescribed that same year by a low vision clinic, a new program concept. By that time, I was under the care of a kind pediatric ophthalmologist who believed I could not see, as he helplessly documented my slide into severe visual ruin. Just before 6th grade, he advised my parents that I should learn Braille through a sight-saving class, as they were called back then, held within a rural elementary school far away. There I would learn Braille and typing. So it was that in September of 1960, a very frightened little Jeff climbed into the yellow school district car for the first long, lonely ride to my new school. I always got to school an hour late, and no sooner had instruction begun after my arrival than it would stall again when my special ed teacher arrived to pull me out of class. We would walk down the long hallway in silence, and I'd be ushered into her classroom for my one-on-one instruction with Miss Stone. She took her work seriously, while my fear of blindness resulted in my great resistance to touching Braille. I could see the Braille dots if I held the paper 1 inch from my good eye, and I told her I did not need to see them since I could see the Braille. With increasingly tense patience, she would take the stiff Braille paper from my hands, lay it flat on the table, and guide my young fingers over the raised dots for their proper reading. Time and again came the contest between her will and my stiff-arming the tactile alphabet, my last defense against a mysterious, fearful world of sightlessness. I would have benefited from counseling, or better, by being introduced to another boy who was my age and who possibly also had low vision and had accepted Braille. But no such approach nor boy existed, and so, instead, Miss Stone had only her own wits and available tools at hand. In desperation, she laid an 8x10 black and white photograph of you, Helen, before me on the table. You were alive then, at 80. She said, Braille will help you. Why, look at Helen Keller. She uses Braille every day, and she's accomplished so much in her life. I stared at the photograph before me. You were perhaps in your 70s in the photograph. You were heavy-set, had gray hair, and your eyes looked funny. I had what was called a wandering eye caused by my central vision being destroyed in my right eye by the cone rod dystrophy, the version of RP I had, which no one had yet diagnosed. I was terribly self-conscious about my funny eyes, and seeing yours made me sick with despair. Helen, I rejected you. I was ashamed of you. I did not feel I was like you. I did not want anyone to associate me with you. The fact that you were deaf and blind seemed an impossibly horrifying condition, and Miss Stone's suggestion that I was like you made Braille seem even more foreign. During our year together, my resistance had been so strong that Miss Stone recommended that I return to my own school district without Braille. She did, however, teach me to type, and my parents bought a large print typewriter, which served me well. I put you away in that memory place where I stored everything from 6th grade, including the Braille alphabet, which I took out very much intact, dusted off, and began to use when I was 35. As an aside, for some reason, my deteriorating vision plateaued when I was 11. My pediatric ophthalmologist diagnosis had settled on optic atrophy, a stable condition, which was wrong. One more thing, Helen. During 6th grade, Miss Stone had me retype a poem you wrote at about my age called The Fairy Queen, the Ice Princess, or something like that. The poem was so good that you were unjustly accused of plagiarism. That typing lesson was also a value lesson I would apply the following year. In 7th grade, I wrote a 3-page poem on my large print typewriter entitled The Bullfight. My 7th grade English teacher also accused me of plagiarism. I had cause to remember your example of advocating, standing for the truth of your innocence. Act 2. Advanced 13 years. While attending the University of California at Berkeley, I became a burgeoning disability rights activist when I was 24. A guiding principle was that those of us with disability shared common life experiences. We were the same at heart. Although the leaders of the movement were generally people who had had polio and used wheelchairs for mobility, I revisited my sense of youth through the lens of disability rights. Among those of us in the Berkeley Disability Rights Group, I became one of the leaders who was bringing forward the unmet needs of people with visual disabilities. Independently, I read and learned about your leadership's successful advocacy efforts and work on the forefront in the earliest days of disability, welfare, and human rights. Another thing, Helen, when I was 27, I recognized my own deep fear of speaking with Michael, a man with severe cerebral palsy. He had a letterboard, but it was useless with my low vision, and I hated to say, "Please repeat yourself again and again." I decided right then that I would never again let fear block me from communicating with any other person. In that consciousness, I went back and spoke at length many times with Michael, and I studied sign language in a little class for blind students with Joanne Hariki, a deaf woman who ran the new Deaf Services Department and reported to me at the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley. Over the years, thanks to my ability with sign language and finger spelling, I've had many conversations with people who are deaf, and a few times those who are deaf and blind. Often I was the only one in the room who spoke their language, and I felt their relief and joy in meeting a hearing yet partially sighted person who had learned sign language. My severe low vision meant that, although I could sign well enough to be understood, my ability to read sign put me in a category of someone who was deaf and blind, since I had to read sign by hand, which is a skill which requires patience and a willing signer for the slow hand-on-hand contact. I thought of you as my guide, Helen, as I sought to be the one who reached across the divide of disability in order to communicate with others locked behind the wall of isolation without enough interlocutors. My vision seemed to be growing worse again. 3 different trips to 3 different eye specialists resulted in the same conclusion. My vision was very hard to measure since it was deteriorating pixel by pixel, and my little islands of vision were extremely hard to assess over time, even for the best low vision specialists. It was my imagination. My vision was stable, they all said. In 1980, at the Helen Keller Centennial Conference in Boston, where I was representing an assistive technology company which was introducing the first personal electronic braille word processor, I was given a sepia-tone poster which contained a large photographic portrait of you as a young girl with Anne Sullivan in high-collar, long-sleeve, full-skirted Victorian dresses. I had the portrait cut out and properly framed behind glass. It still hangs in my office, reminding me to communicate. Act 3. In 1982, I began work as Director of Rehabilitation at the Cleveland Sight Center, a leading private blindness agency. The Executive Director, Cleo Dolan, had met you, Helen, and your signed photograph was on the landing of the staircase off the lobby of our building. When I first climbed those stairs, I was stopped in my tracks. The photograph was exactly the same one that Miss Stone had placed before me 32 years before. I looked at your smiling face, and I did not see your eyes in the same way I had when I was only 11 years old. Now I did not notice them much. It was rather seeing the face of an elder who was smiling back across her prodigious career that has shaped the American experience and the world experience for so many. I glanced at your picture hundreds of times during the decade of that career period at the Cleveland Sight Center. I established several new programs, one of which was regarded as a world model, and Doctors Without Borders referred a client from Vietnam to that program. I even had reason to reach out to the organization Helen Keller International, and I thought about how different my sense of you was compared to how that frightened boy had seen you. I felt that you were encouraging me on, smiling that beneficent smile toward one of many younger protégés of yours. It was there where I was one of only 3 staff members who spoke sign language. One was a deaf-blind specialist, and the other a communications teacher, whom I moved into my new computer access center as our first assistive technology teacher. Her name was Jean Babanchak. She taught our few clients who were deaf and blind amidst her other blind clients. The fact that we both knew fingerspelling allowed me to read her frantic message, teach them to sign, the morning after a devastating brain cancer surgery during which she had lost her ability to speak. I did teach her inner circle to fingerspell. During another crisis, I was driven to the emergency room to help Doris, the deaf-blind woman who was a client of ours. She was been taken there after a serious fall. I served as her interpreter with the doctors who were addressing her injuries until a qualified interpreter, the deaf-blind specialist, who was also her case manager, arrived. Doris had been relieved to see me so that finally she could tell the doctor about the pain in her shoulder from her fall on the ice. In December of 1983, when my wife was pregnant with our second child, one of my eyes was injured while playing with John Kyle, our 7-year-old son. This time the ophthalmologist had a dire and for the first time accurate diagnosis once he got past my minor eye injury. The good Dr. Wolf told me in no uncertain terms on that dark winter afternoon that I would absolutely lose the rest of my vision. As I sat in stunned silence, he asked me to repeat what he had said, making sure I had digested his shocking news. That introduced my next stage of relationship to you, Helen. At 34, knowing I would become blind, I began to read everything I could about you, and you became my one and only true disability rights hero. Your lifetime of advocacy, leadership, and accomplishment set a high bar, well beyond my reach, as any hero's stature should be. While I could still see, I thought to summon memory with visual images that I could revisit after I became blind. So it was, while working in Oregon, I sat in a glass canopy airplane over the Willamette Gorge, where I beheld the magnificent spillway of some federal dam and a majestic waterfall down the canyon's steep face. For years, every 6 months, I was in New York City for meetings of the editorial advisory board of the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness of the American Foundation for the Blind, your own organization, which I knew and loved. After one meeting, I delayed my flight home in order to spend the afternoon looking at the extensive collection of photographs of you, Helen, held by the organization you founded. Their librarian brought me a disorganized lot, many file folders containing pictures of you taken at different stages of your life, printed in various sizes. It was their complete catalog of photos of you. I looked carefully at them all. I only recall one. I stared at it a long while. In my hall of memory, I can see the portrait of you as a pretty young woman sitting at your desk, writing a letter, smiling. You were looking a little off camera. You mastered so many forms of communication, Helen, speaking although you could not hear, reading lips by touch through the Chidoma method, Braille, handwriting, and Morse code, I believe. You wrote poetry, books, thoughtful philosophical memes on disability, blindness, and deafness, facing adversity, I think you were in vaudeville shows, won an Oscar. You changed public policy concerning babies' vision saving, established the American Foundation for the Blind, rode horses, changed the world. You were unstoppable, unsinkable, a force of nature. Now comes Act 4. When I was around 50, I was seeking answers to my concerns about my gradual hearing loss. It was about that time I had begun to wear hearing aids, which still help a great deal. I sought out the genetic counseling department of the Cleveland Clinic. It was the clinic's specialized retina department where my eye condition had been diagnosed as inverse RP or cone rod dystrophy. RP is a genetic condition, although in 50% of cases, like my own, there is no known genetic history. A fraction of those with RP have Usher syndrome, differing combinations of vision and hearing loss. Maybe I have Usher's. I learned that perhaps you had Usher syndrome as well, Helen. But without genetic history, there's no way to tell whether my hearing loss will result in profound deafness, hopefully an unlikely outcome. My consultation was of no value. Again, I was on my own, but now I had a sort of guide and peer counselor by the name of Helen Keller. This is not hyperbolic, Helen. I've gone blind, and I've learned that living in the valley of the blind is not so bad, in part because I have blind friends with whom I laugh, share moments of ambiguity, experience with new technology, and generally bond thanks to our shared humanity and disability. My approach to hearing loss includes finding humor in the bizarre mishearing moments that fill every day. Losing my hearing is frightening, naturally. Disability is concentrated loss. Since all humans share loss, blindness, hearing loss, or any disability does not really separate us, but rather it unites us with the rest of the human family through the shared experience of loss. If we can break through our own and others' fear, I should know. I've lost a serious chunk of hearing, and I've recently noticed a new loss which has crept into my left ear like a sneak thief, silently pulling more precious hearing away. Helen, if I should lose all my hearing, which is unlikely, I will never stop being able to communicate. I can read and write Braille. I can use American Sign Language. Advancements in technology, my iron will, and my loving family will be there, solid. Especially my wife, Christy, whose daily supportive interactions with me may change but will never be broken. I will continue to advocate, to teach, to write, to sing my songs of inclusion, and to reach out to the wide human family concerning the wholeness of all of us who live with disability. I've gone from being afraid of you, Helen, to revering you, to feeling you encourage me onward as my silent ally. You stand alone on the world's stage. Your life was so different than mine, and yet in many important ways much the same. I've just learned that you said you would see again when you die. I thought that too, and it inspired me to write "We Will See One Another in the Morning," which is on my hospice album, Peace, Sweet Peace. I will close my letter with 3 rounds of sincere gratitude. First, for you looking over my shoulder for years in my office, posed in that early photographic sepia tone plate as a serious child, reaching towards Anne Sullivan's teaching hands. Secondly, I thank you, the lovely young woman smiling at me from your portrait, which hangs in my hall of memory. Helen, I finally thank you, the elder, whose image morphed from a face which frightened me to one which encouraged me and gives me comfort. You are my hero, and I think of you as my friend. If I had been fortunate enough to have known you, I think we would have had long talks, and I would have learned so much more from you. Warm regards, Jeff Moyer. This is a deeply personal show, of course, and I can't thank Rebecca Alexander enough for her candid share of her view of life from her perch now with her double disability and her fame and her ongoing leadership. Rebecca Alexander, lead on, cannot wait to hear you narrate Becoming Helen Keller, the PBS American Masters series, conclusion for the season, which will air October 19th. And now about next week's show. Next week, we're going to revisit theater, although from a very different vantage point. I'm going to interview a woman who is a great scholar of theater, a director of theater, an actor, and a coach of actors. She is one of the founding directors of a disability rights theater group in Berkeley called the Rye Crips. And I'll be interviewing her about her new theater undertaking called Access Classics. Mickey Goldhaber, the woman of whom I speak, is one of the real great lights in disability access and how we can take this profound experience we've all been through with COVID and pivot. What she is beginning is a virtual acting company, accessible to all of the actors she's pulling into her embrace through Access Classics, and also making it available to the wide audience of people with disabilities who otherwise would have a great deal of trouble getting to the theater. So we're going to interview my friend Mickey Goldhaber. I was connected with her this last summer with a show that Rye Crips did called Occupy, about the 1977 San Francisco federal building sit-in that led to the signing of the regulations for Section 504 and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I did the music for that demonstration, and I did the music for their show. The other way we're connected with her is our wonderful interpreters, Kara Beck and Angelique. Last name escapes me, but Angelique, the stand-in interpreter, who are both interpreters for her theater company. That's how we met. So next week, or in 2 weeks, come join us again. And in the meantime, please become a member. It doesn't cost anything. If you'd like to donate at $5 a month, we'd love to have your contribution. And remember that if you see everybody with a disability as someone inside that experience that is like you, and you reach out to them and you find a way to communicate, you're going to fill your life and theirs with
Peace, sweet peace.
So come back and join us again. Mash that like button, share our show. Please invite your friends, and we'll see you then.